The end of the galactic concord happened at a place called the Cygnus Cluster. It was not a quiet end. It was loud, bright, and full of fire. For 10 years, the Gilani Dominion had moved through the stars. They were like locusts, but worse. They did not want slaves or cities. They wanted everything. They broke down planets for their materials and took all life for their food. They left empty rocks behind them. Admiral Jean floated in his command chair on the bridge of the Concorde flagship, Stars Resolve. His skin, a soft blue, was pale with tiredness. His 4 eyes watched the main screen. The screen showed a nightmare. Hundreds of Concorde ships, from many different species, fought against the dark, spiky shapes of the Dominion fleet. Bright lasers cut through space. Ships exploded into silent flowers of orange and white. "Report," Jean said. His voice LOW. An officer with green scales, named Kale, turned from his station. His voice shook. "The right flank is breaking, Admiral. The Tauran carriers, they are gone. The World Render is moving into position." Jean felt cold. The World Render was the Gilani mothership, a weapon the size of a small moon. It did not fight other ships. It killed planets. On the screen, the enormous enemy ship moved slowly, like a predator that knows it has already won. It pushed past the burning wrecks of Concorde cruisers. Its front began to glow with a terrible green light. "All ships, target the World Render. Pour everything you have into its forward section." Jean shouted into the comms. It was useless. The smaller Dominion ships swarmed like angry insects, protecting their queen. The Concorde's strongest attacks hit shields that flashed but did not fail. The World Render's glow became brighter. It was aiming at the planet below, Viridia. Viridia was a green, beautiful world. It was the last stronghold of the Concorde, filled with billions of refugees and the last working shipyards. Jean saw a small fighter, a Kithari scout ship, dart bravely in front of the green beam's path. It vanished in a tiny flash, a sacrifice that meant nothing. "Admiral, we have to pull back. We can't," Kale started. "And go where?" Jean interrupted, not with anger, but with a deep, heavy sadness. "There is no back anymore." The green beam fired. It was not a quick laser. It was a thick, solid river of destructive energy that connected the World Render to the planet Viridia. Where it touched the planet's atmosphere, the sky caught fire. Then it touched the surface. The beam began to move, slowly, across the continent. It did not explode. It erased mountains, cities, oceans, forests. Everything it touched was turned into dust and molten rock in seconds. On the bridge of the Stars Resolve, there was complete silence. The only sounds were the soft beeps of computers and the quiet sobs of a young communications officer named Yuna. Her ears, long and pointed, drooped against her head. Jean could only watch. His mission had failed. His people, all the peoples of the Concorde, had failed. The galaxy's last light of organized resistance was being scrubbed away below him. A violent shake rocked the flagship. A red light flashed on Jin's panel. "Direct hit to engineering. Main power failing," Kale yelled. The main screen flickered. The image of the dying planet was replaced by the face of the Gilani hive commander. It looked like a giant, black insect. Its mouth parts clicked and moved. A translated voice, flat and without feeling, came through the speakers. "You are biomass. You are material. Your resistance is illogical. You will be processed. The cycle is complete." The communication ended. The screen went back to the view of the battle, but the battle was over. Concorde ships were fleeing, breaking apart, or surrendering. The Dominion ships did not take prisoners. They captured the surrendering ships and began cutting into them with tractor beams and boarding tubes to take them apart right there in space. "Admiral orders?" Kale asked, his voice hollow. Jean looked at his crew. Yuna, Kale, old tactical officer Boren with his wrinkled gray skin. They were all looking at him. He had led them here to the end of everything. "Scatter the fleet," Jean said, the words tasting like ash. "Break into single ships or small groups. Go dark. No communications. Run to the empty places, the nebulas, the black zones. Preserve the seed. That is all that is left. He stood up from his chair. I will stay. I will draw their attention. The star's resolve still has some fight. It will give you minutes. No one argued. They knew it was the only way. They began transferring command codes and sending the scatter order. Jean walked to the viewport, placing a hand on the cold glass. He watched the world render finish its work. Viridia was no longer green. It was a brown, dead ball, glowing in patches with molten rock. He thought of the old stories, the histories. He remembered a brief mention from his academy days about a solitary species from a backwater yellow star. They had been offered a place in the Concorde long ago. They had refused. They were seen as strange, too focused on their own world, too violent in their history. The Concorde had thought them primitive and unimportant. They were forgotten. Humanity, the name was. Their star was called Sol. They had kept to themselves and were never heard from again. Some thought they had died out in their own wars. As the alarms blared and the first boarding clamps shook the hull of his dying ship, a strange, hopeless thought crossed Jin's mind. That solitude, that refusal to join, now seemed like wisdom. Maybe they were the lucky ones. Maybe they had died quickly, long ago, and never had to see this. The bridge door hissed open. The clicking, chittering sounds of Gilani warriors filled the air. Jean turned, raising his sidearm, a small light in the overwhelming dark. The galaxy was devastated. And in the silent, empty void between the stars, forgotten by all, something slept. It had been sleeping for a very, very long time. 3 standard cycles passed. The Gilani Dominion did not celebrate their victory. They simply continued their work. They moved from system to system in a slow, terrible wave. Starships became silent graves. Planets became mining sites. The music of the galaxy was now the hum of harvesters and the silent scream of dying worlds. In a dark corner of space, far from the main routes, a single ship drifted. It was the Whisper of Dawn, a Kithari light cruiser. Its smooth, silvery hull was now scarred and blackened. It was a refugee ship, carrying the last survivors of its crew and a handful of others who had escaped the fall of Viridia. Life on board was quiet and filled with fear. Admiral Jean was here, but he was no longer an admiral. He was just Jean. He spent his days looking at star charts, searching for pockets of space the Dominion might ignore. He found very few. Every day, the map of safe space grew smaller. The mood on the ship was heavy. People moved through the corridors slowly. They spoke in low voices. Hope was a thing they used to remember, like the taste of food from their homeworlds. One person did not move slowly. Her name was Mira. She was young, with sharp eyes and a mind that needed puzzles. Before the fall, she had been a communications apprentice. Now, she was the entire communications department on the Whisper of Dawn. Her job was to listen for any signal that was not the Dominion. Most days, she heard only static, the emptiness of space, and sometimes, the terrifyingly ordered chatter of Gilani harvest commands. It was enough to make anyone give up. But Mira did not give up. She had built a special project, a secret one. She called it the Echo Search. The ship's main computer was busy with survival, so she used a small, old terminal in a storage room. Her idea was simple. If everyone was listening for new signals, maybe the answer was in old ones. Very old ones. She programmed the terminal to search through the ship's deep archives. These were backups of planetary databases, downloaded in the frantic last days before evacuations. Mountains of forgotten data, cultural records, science logs, even entertainment vids from dead worlds. She was looking for anomalies, for signals that were strange or strong or just different. For 2 weeks, she found nothing but dust data. Then, one night, her terminal pinged. IT had found a data packet tagged from the Sol System archive pre-Concorde era. The packet was badly corrupted, as if it had traveled through a star's storm. Most of it was garbage code, but a small piece was readable. It was a distress call. The language was marked as Terran English. The translation software struggled. It was very old. The voice was fragmented. This is
Uns Retribution.
Guardian Protocol. Engaged. Cannot hold. Falling back to lockbox coordinates. We are the last. If you hear this, the gun is loaded. Then came a string of numbers. Star coordinates. And one more clear word, spoken with a tone of final command. Sleep. The signal ended. The coordinates pointed to a sector of space that was a known hazard. It was the Helix Nebula, a vast cloud of gas and radiation. Ships did not go there. There were no stars, no planets. Just dangerous, beautiful clouds. Myra's heart beat fast. A human ship? Guardian Protocol? The gun is loaded? It sounded like a battle log. A last stand. But the coordinates were in empty space. She ran a cross-check. The energy signatures in the corrupted parts of the signal were off the scale. They did not match any known Concorde or Dominion technology. The power readings were theoretically impossible. She took her findings to the ship's acting captain, a tired Tauran named Captain Alara. Alara looked at the data, then at Myra's hopeful face. Mira, Alara said softly, this is a ghost. It is a signal from a dead species from hundreds of years ago. The Helix Nebula is a death trap. Radiation will fry our shields in hours. There is nothing there but dust and memories. But the energy signals, Mira started. Our corrupted data, Alara finished. Wishful thinking. Our job is to keep these people alive, not to chase legends into a graveyard of gas. Mira left the room, her hope crumbling. She understood Alara's logic. It was the logic of survival. But later that night, she went to find Jean. He was in the observation deck, staring at the stars. She showed him the data on her handheld pad. Jean listened silently. He looked at the broken words. Uns Retribution. The gun is loaded. Sleep. He remembered his thought on the bridge of the Star's Resolve, as the Gilani boarded. He remembered thinking humanity was lucky to be gone. What if they are not gone? Mira whispered, her voice tight. What if they are just sleeping? Like the signal says? It is a very thin thread, Mira, Jean said, his 4 eyes reflecting the stars. To risk our last ship on a ghost story. What else is there? She asked, and the question hung in the air between them. They were interrupted. The ship's alarm blared. A single piercing sound. They ran to the bridge. Kale was at the sensor station, his green scales pale. Dominion probe, he said. It just pinged us from the edge of the system. It has seen us. A harvest fleet will be here within hours. Panic filled the bridge. They all knew what a harvest fleet meant. The end of the Whisper of Dawn. The end of them all. Captain Alara started giving orders to run, but the nearest safe jump point was far away. The Dominion ships were faster. Jean looked at the star map, then at Mira. He saw the coordinates for the Helix Nebula glowing on her forgotten pad. It was a death trap, but the Dominion would not follow them into a nebula. The radiation and dust messed with their hive mind signals. It was the one place they might avoid. It was also, possibly, the location of a ghost. Captain? Jean said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the fear. Set a course for these coordinates. Maximum speed. He pointed to the location on the main screen. The Helix Nebula pulsed on the map, a swirl of dangerous color. Alara stared. That is suicide, Jean. Staying here is a quicker suicide, he replied. The nebula will disrupt their sensors. It is our only chance. Alara looked at the terrified faces of her crew. She had no other option. Helm, plot the course. Now! The Whisper of Dawn turned and shot toward the swirling clouds of the nebula. Behind them, on the sensors, they could see the first dark shapes of the Dominion harvest fleet arriving in the system. They were running from one unknown death toward another. But one of those unknowns, Mira thought as she held onto her console, had a name. A name from an old, broken signal. Retribution. The Helix Nebula was not empty space. It was a storm of color and silence. Great clouds of purple and blue gas swirled around the ship. Lightning made of energy, not water, flashed in the distance. Tiny pieces of dust and ice pinged against the hull of the Whisper of Dawn. The sound was like constant, gentle rain. Inside the ship, The mood was tense. The lights were dim to save power. The crew spoke in whispers. The nebula's radiation was strong. It made the sensors fuzzy and unreliable. They were flying blind into a beautiful, dangerous cloud. Admiral Jean stood on the bridge. He watched the colors flow past the viewport. He hoped he had not made a terrible mistake. He had sent them here to hide. But he also had Myra's coordinates in his mind. He did not say it out loud, but part of him was looking for the ghost ship. Mira was at her station. Her screen was full of static and strange energy readings from the nebula. It was hard to pick out any one signal. She adjusted her scanners, trying to filter out the noise. She was looking for something solid. Something that was not gas or lightning. Radiation levels are rising, Kale reported. His voice was calm, but his green scales looked dull under the dim light. Shields are holding, but they will not last more than a few hours at this rate. Captain Alara nodded. Understood. Keep us on the plotted path. The deeper we go, the harder it will be for the Dominion to find us. Suddenly, Myra's screen flickered. A sharp, clean line of data cut through the mess of static. It was a metallic reading, very large, and it was not a natural rock. The shape was too regular, too straight. I have something, she said. Her voice was tight with excitement and fear. Bearing 270 by 34, 30 kilometers ahead. It's massive. Everyone on the bridge looked at her screen. The shape resolved slowly as they got closer. It was not a planet. It was not an asteroid. It was a ship. But it was like no ship any of them had ever seen. It drifted silently in the nebula's glow. It was over 5 kilometers long. The shape was brutal and simple. It looked like a giant spearhead or an axe made for a god. The hull was a dark, non-reflective gray. It did not shimmer. It seemed to swallow the faint light of the nebula. There were no bright running lights, no signs of engine glow. It was dark and cold, and it was covered in scars. Long, deep grooves were carved into its hull. There were marks from explosions and weapons that had left strange, crystalline burns. This ship had seen a war from a long, long time ago. Stars above, Captain Alara whispered. What is that? Myra's translation software finally found the markings near the front of the ship. The letters were clear, written in a simple, blocky style. They spelled a name, Retribution. Below it, in smaller letters, UNS.IT was real. The ghost was real. The whisper of dawn moved closer, slowly. The human ship made their cruiser look like a lifeboat next to a mountain. They could see details now. Giant weapon ports now closed and dark. Huge shield generators that looked like curved cliffs. Sensor arrays as big as buildings. No energy readings, Kale said, confused.
No reactor signature.
No life signs. It's a tomb. A frozen tomb. Maybe, Jean said, but he was looking at the scars. That ship did not get those marks from sitting quietly. It fought. It survived something terrible. He made a decision. We need to go aboard. Alara shook her head.
No.
Our mission is to survive, not to explore ancient wrecks. That thing has been dead for centuries. The Dominion Harvest Fleet is waiting at the nebula's edge, Jean said calmly. Our shields are failing. This is not just exploration. It is shelter. That hull is thick. The radiation out here will not touch anyone inside it. And, he paused. The signal said, the gun is loaded. I need to know what that means. A young mechanic spoke up from the back of the bridge. His name was Tay. He had been fixing everything on the ship since they fled. He was good with his hands and had a curious mind. Sir, Tay said, I have scanned the hull. There is a main hangar bay door. Its systems are dead, but the mechanics look simple. I might be able to open it with a manual charge. Make a small hole for a shuttle. Alara looked from Jean, to Myra's hopeful face, to the worried crew. She had no good options left. Fine. A small team. Scout only. 1 hour. Then you return. We cannot stay here long. Minutes later, a small shuttle left the Whisper of Dawn. On board were Jean, Mira, Tay, and 2 security officers. The shuttle flew toward the giant, dark ship. It felt like flying toward a cliff. The hangar door was enormous. Tay used a small, shaped explosive. It blew a neat, person-sized hole in the smaller service door next to the main one. The hole led into pure darkness. They floated through the hole, their suit lights cutting beams through the black. They landed in a vast, empty hangar. Could have held 50 of their shuttles. The air was cold and still. There was no sound. Their lights showed a floor that was clean and smooth, not dusty. The air was breathable, but stale, like a room closed for 1,000 years. They took off their helmets. The silence was heavy. "Hello?" Mira called out. Her voice echoed through the gigantic space. No answer. They walked toward a large door leading deeper into the ship. As they approached, a soft, blue light glowed from strips in the floor and ceiling. The door hissed open silently. The ship was welcoming them. They followed the lights. The corridors were wide and high. Everything was built on a huge scale for people their size, but everything felt strong and solid. They saw no signs of a fight inside. No damage. No bodies. The lights led them to a central room. A bridge. It was wide and circular. There were chairs and stations, all empty. At the front was a large viewport, now showing only the swirling colors of the nebula. In the center of the room was a single, large chair. The command chair. As they stepped onto the bridge, the room came alive. Panels lit up with soft white and blue light. A low hum vibrated through the floor. A holographic sphere appeared in the air above the command chair. In the center of the sphere, a single, bright blue light pulsed like a calm heartbeat. A voice filled the room. It was female, clear, and without emotion. It was not a living voice. It was a recording or an intelligence. "Welcome," the voice said. "You are not Gilani. You are not human. Your biosigns are registered as non-hostile, multi-species collective. State your designation and purpose." Jean stepped forward. He spoke clearly. "I am Admiral Jean of the Galactic Concord. These are survivors. Our purpose is survival. The galaxy is being destroyed." The blue light pulsed. Concord designation, not found in primary records. Last update. Standard year 2247. Current threat assessment requested. Mira spoke up. "The threat is the Gilani Dominion. They destroy everything. They have killed billions. They are here right now outside this nebula." The blue light pulsed faster. Querying, "Gilani Dominion. No match in threat database." There was a pause. Accessing observational data from long-range sensors. On the main viewport, the image of the nebula vanished. It was replaced by a star map. Then it showed recordings. It was seeing through the nebula using sensors far more powerful than theirs. It showed the Dominion harvest fleet waiting at the edge of the cloud. It showed images, pulled from the Whisper of Dawn's computers, of planets being consumed. Of the world render. The blue light in the hologram glowed brighter. A new tone entered the AI's voice. It was still calm, but it now had a sharp, cold edge. Pattern recognized. Systemic xenocide. Biomass consumption cycle. Threat category. Absolute. The viewport changed again. It showed a symbol. A single, unblinking human eye with a star for a pupil. Below it were words. Guardian Protocol. "Prime Directive is active," the AI voice said. "Retribution is awake." The low hum of the Retribution's awakened systems was the only sound on the vast bridge. The air felt different now. It was no longer the air of a tomb. It was charged, like the moment before a storm. Jean, Mira, and Tay stood frozen, looking at the pulsing blue light in the hologram. The words hung in the air. "Prime Directive is active. Retribution is awake." "What is the Guardian Protocol?" Jean asked, his voice careful. The viewport changed. The symbol of the eye and star vanished. In its place appeared the image of a human woman. She wore a simple, dark uniform. Her black hair was tied back. Her face was stern, but her eyes were tired. She looked like someone who had carried a great weight for a very long time. A name appeared below her. Captain SO Jean Lee. Her recorded voice spoke. It was not the calm AI voice. This voice was human. It was full of weariness and iron will. "If you are seeing this," Captain Lee said, "then you have come to our lockbox, and you have awakened the retribution. That means you face something we hoped would never exist. A threat that chooses total annihilation." She looked directly out from the screen, as if she could see them. Humanity learned its lesson the hard way. We nearly destroyed ourselves, more than once. When we finally reached the stars, we found we were not alone. We saw many kinds of life. Some were peaceful, some were not. We saw cycles of war that stretched for millennia. The image behind her changed. It showed old, blurry pictures of human wars, cities in flames, desolate landscapes. Then it showed strange, ancient alien battles pulled from human history files. We decided we would not join that cycle. We would not build a big empire. We would not make endless fleets. Instead, we built one thing: promise, a last resort. The image showed the retribution being built in space. Thousands of workers, mountains of material. It was a project that must have taken generations. We called it the Guardian Protocol. The retribution is not a warship. It is a judgment. Its single purpose is to identify and end any civilization that commits what we called absolute evil. Not conquest, not war, but the systematic, complete destruction of other-thinking life. Captain Lee's face became very serious. We did not make this weapon lightly. We filled its mind, its AI, with every philosophy of justice, mercy, and ethics we had. We gave it one rule: only act when all other paths are gone. Only act against a threat that will leave the galaxy silent. Then it must act completely. It must end the threat, not just defeat it. The recording paused for a moment. "The gun is loaded," Captain Lee said, using the same words from the old signal. "It has been loaded for centuries. We put the retribution to sleep here, in this quiet place, hoping it would never wake up. We hoped the galaxy would grow wiser." She offered a sad, small smile. "It seems the galaxy did not. So the choice is now yours. You have found the weapon. The retribution will follow the command of a living, conscious mind. It needs a counsel, a trigger puller. Will you use it? Will you become the hand that delivers this judgment? Think carefully. To use this power is to change yourself forever." The recording ended. The image of Captain Lee faded. The blue AI light pulsed in the silence. "The directive is clear," the AI said. "The Gilani Dominion meets all criteria for absolute threat. Response is authorized. A command link must be established with a non-hostile, multi-species council. This ensures the judgment is not one species acting alone. Do you consent to form the council?" Gene felt a heavy coldness in his stomach. This was the choice. He had wanted a weapon. Now he held the deadliest weapon ever imagined. Using it felt wrong. It felt like becoming a god or a monster. They would not be fighting soldiers. They would be erasing an entire civilization from existence. Mira spoke first. "They are not a civilization, Gene. They are a hive. A single mind controlling billions of bodies. They don't have art or music or families. They only have hunger. They are a disease. A doctor cuts out a disease to save the body." Tay, who had been quiet, walked over to a console. He touched it. Schematics appeared. "Look at this," he said. His voice was filled with awe. "The main weapon. It's not a planet killer." Gene and Mira came to look. The schematic showed a complex system deep in the heart of the ship.
Tai pointed.
"It's called the Atropos Lance. The data says it doesn't destroy matter. It targets quantum bonds. Specifically, it can sever a synthetic psychic network. A hive mind link." Myra's eyes went wide. "It doesn't kill the Gilani creatures?" "No," Tay said, reading the text. "It shatters the connection. It turns a single, vast mind into billions of separate individual minds. Confused. Alone. It doesn't kill the body. It kills the collective will." The difference was huge. It was not genocide. It was surgery. A separation. A loud alarm echoed through the retribution. The AI's voice remained calm. Alert! Dominion Harvest Fleet has detected the energy surge from our awakening. They are entering the nebula. 7 capital-class harvesters, plus escort vessels. Estimated time to engagement range, 23 minutes. On the main viewport, they saw the view from the ship's powerful sensors. The dark, spiky shapes of the Dominion fleet were moving into the colorful gas clouds. They were coming. They had sensed new technology to consume. Jean looked at Mira. He looked at Tay. He thought of Captain Lee's tired eyes. He thought of Viridia burning. He thought of the galaxy falling silent, one star at a time. This was not about revenge. It was not about power. It was about stopping a force that would never, ever stop on its own. "We consent," Jean said, his voice firm. "Establish the command link. We will form the council." "Acknowledged," the AI said. 3 chairs on the bridge slid forward. They were simple, but they had ports for neural links. Jean, Mira, and Tay sat down. Gentle tendrils connected to ports on their temples. Suddenly, Jean could feel the ship, not with his hands, but with his mind. He felt the immense power of the contained singularity in its core. He felt the strength of the hull. He felt the targeting systems of weapons he could not name. It was overwhelming, like holding a star in his mind. Mira gasped. She could see the entire network of the ship, the flow of power, the status of every system. It was like seeing a galaxy of information. Tay felt the machinery, the engines, the beautiful, terrible complexity of the ancient human technology. He understood it instantly and perfectly. "Council is formed," the AI stated. "Admiral Jean, tactical authority. Mira, systems coordination. Tay, engineering synchronization. You are now the mind of the retribution. The enemy is at the gate. What is your command?" Jean looked at the viewport. The lead Dominion harvester was pushing through the nebulous clouds, its own weapons beginning to glow with green energy. It was starting to fire on the tiny whisper of dawn, which was hiding behind the retribution like a child behind a parent. Jean took a deep breath. He felt the weight of the gun in his hand. He felt the hope of Mira beside him. He felt the steady readiness of Tay. His voice did not shake. "Helm," he said, using the old human term that now felt natural. "Take us out. Intercept that harvester. Weapons. Stand by." The retribution, silent for centuries, began to move. The retribution moved. It did not surge forward like a Concorde ship. It did not dart like a fighter. It simply began to glide through the nebulous colorful gases. Its motion was smooth, relentless, and impossibly quiet, cut through space with a terrifying grace. The swirling clouds parted around its giant dark hull. On the bridge, Jean felt every shift and turn in his mind. The ship was an extension of his thoughts. He saw the tactical map painted directly behind his eyes. 7 red dots, the Dominion harvesters, spread out before them. The closest one was targeting the Whisper of Dawn with a tractor beam, trying to pull the small cruiser in for dismantling. "Focus on the lead harvester," Jean said, his voice calm. "Keep the Whisper safe." The Retribution's response was instant. A bank of secondary weapons, smaller than the main lance, swiveled on the hull. They looked like simple metal rods. They glowed a soft, pure white for a second. Then they fired. There was no loud noise in space, but on the bridge, they felt a deep thrum through the ship's structure. Beams of condensed energy, brighter than the nebula's lightning, lanced out. They struck the Dominion harvester's tractor beam emitters with perfect accuracy. The green beam flickered and died. The harvester shuddered. On the Whisper of Dawn, Captain Alara stared at her screen. What was that?" The Dominion ship turned its attention from the small prey to the massive new threat. Its own weapons, designed to break apart asteroids and hulls, fired. Thick bolts of green plasma shot across the distance and splashed against the Retribution's shields. The shield impact registered on Jin's mental display, a slight ripple of energy. No damage. The shield integrity bar barely moved. "Their weapons are inefficient," Mira said from her chair. Her eyes were closed, but she saw the energy flow. She was managing the power distribution, feeding more to the forward shields. They use brute force. We use focused energy. It's like comparing a club to a scalpel. The lead harvester, realizing its attacks were useless, changed tactics. It launched a swarm of boarding pods. Hundreds of them, like metal insects, shot toward the retribution. Point defense, Jean ordered. Across the dark hull of the human warship, hundreds of small ports opened. Tiny, rapid-fire lasers emerged. They began to fire not in wild bursts but in short, precise clicks. Each click meant a boarding pod vanished in a tiny flash of light. It was methodical. It was complete. In less than a minute, the swarm was gone, leaving only a cloud of fine debris. The retribution closed the distance. It was now looming over the Dominion harvester. The harvester looked small and fragile next to it. The harvester tried to ram them. It fired all its engines in a desperate last move. The retribution did not dodge. A section of its hull near the front glowed with a blue energy field. The harvester slammed into it. There was no explosion. The energy field shimmered, and the harvester's front section crumpled like paper against a wall. It bounced off, spinning helplessly, its structure broken. Jean felt no thrill of victory, only a cold certainty. This was not a battle. This was a demonstration. The retribution was so far beyond this enemy it was almost sad. The other harvesters are converging, Tay said. His mind was linked with the engines and internal systems. They are forming a net, trying to surround us. Jean looked at the tactical map. 6 more red dots were moving into position, blocking the way out of the nebula. They were learning. They were trying to trap the giant ship. They want to overwhelm us with numbers, Mira said. Their hive mind is coordinating the attack. A plan formed in Jin's mind. He did not want to destroy all these ships. That would be a waste of energy, and it would not solve the real problem. The real problem was the single mind controlling them all. The mind on the world render. We need to get to the world render, Jean said. This is just noise. Tay, can we push through them? Tay felt the immense power in the ship's heart. The engines are at 12% capacity. We can go to 50 for a short burst. Nothing in this nebula can stop us if we do. Do it, Jean said. The Retribution's main engines, dormant for centuries, activated fully. On the hull, giant vents glowed with a fierce blue-white light. The ship began to accelerate. It moved faster than anything its size should be able to move. It flew straight for the center of the forming Dominion net. The harvesters fired everything they had. A storm of green plasma and kinetic rounds filled space. The Retribution's shields glowed brighter, absorbing the punishment. The integrity bar on Jin's display dipped slightly, then stabilized as Mira redirected power. The human ship did not fire back. It simply plowed through the storm. It reached the line of 2 harvesters trying to block its path. At the last second, it rotated slightly. Its giant, armored flank clipped one of the harvesters. The Dominion ship did not just break. It shattered. Pieces of its hull spun away into the nebula. The Retribution did not even slow down. It shot through the gap and left the encircling fleet behind. In moments, the harvesters were just small dots on the sensor screen, lost in the colorful gas. They had broken through. The path to the edge of the nebula was clear. Setting course for the last known location of the world render, Jean said. The AI fed him the coordinates from the Whisper's data. It was a star system 2 jumps away, where the Dominion was currently consuming another world. The Retribution soared toward the nebula's exit. The beautiful, deadly clouds began to thin. Ahead was the clear, black space of the starry void. Jean felt a strange stillness. The first part was over. They had the weapon. They had broken the first barrier. The next part would be different. They would not be fighting harvesters in a confused nebula. They would be flying into the heart of the Dominion's power. They would be facing the world render itself. He looked at Mira and Tay. Their faces were pale, but their eyes were determined. They had felt the ship's power too. They knew what they had to do. The Retribution emerged from the Helix Nebula. The colorful gases fell away behind it. Before it was the infinite dark, dotted with stars. And somewhere out there, in that dark, was the mind that devoured galaxies. The giant human warship pointed its spear-like bow toward the target. Its engines glowed steadily. It began the final journey. The journey through normal space was a silent, tense vigil. The Retribution moved with a steady, unstoppable speed. Inside the bridge, the only sounds were the quiet hum of the ship and the low breaths of its three commanders. Gene kept his mind on the tactical feed. He watched the star map, the blinking dot that was their target drawing nearer. Mira monitored the immense power flows, ensuring the Atropos lance and the shields were ready. Tay felt the steady beat of the engines, a contained star's worth of energy waiting to be unleashed. They dropped out of their final jump at the edge of the target system. The viewport filled with the horrible, familiar sight. It was a system of 5 planets. The third planet, a blue and green world named Cerulia, was the current project. The world render hung in orbit around it. From the belly of the monstrous hive ship, the same terrible green beam they had seen at Viridia was already at work. A continent on the day side of Cerulia was burning, turning to ash and molten glass. A smear of brown death spread across the vibrant blue around the world render. A protective fleet of dozens of harvesters and hundreds of drones swarmed like flies on a corpse. "They've seen us," Mira reported, her voice tight. "The entire fleet is breaking orbit. They're coming." The Dominion forces turned as one. It was a cloud of dark metal and green light, moving to intercept the single ship that dared approach their queen. The scale was overwhelming. Gene felt a flicker of the old despair. It was one ship against an armada. But then he felt the solid, patient power of the Retribution beneath him. He was not in a Concorde cruiser anymore. "Hold course," Gene said. "Directly for the world render. Do not stop. Do not slow." The Retribution obeyed. It flew straight into the oncoming storm. The space between them became a lightning storm of green energy. Plasma bolts, laser cutters, and kinetic slugs slammed into the human ship's shields. The shield glowed a fierce, shimmering blue-white, absorbing the punishment. The bridge shook, but it was a distant tremor, felt through the neural link. "Shields at 87%, Mira called out, her voice calm as she diverted power from non-essential systems. "They are focusing fire. Their coordination is perfect. Because it's one mind controlling them all," Tay said from his station. "They don't get scared. They don't make mistakes. They just follow the order to destroy." "Then we break the order," Gene replied. The Retribution began to fire back. Its secondary batteries came alive, spitting precise lines of white energy. Each shot crippled a harvester's engine or blew a drone into dust. But for every one they destroyed, 3 more took its place. The ship was a rock in a raging river, enduring the onslaught, moving forward inch by inch. A massive harvester, larger than the others, positioned itself directly in their path. It fired its engines to ram them, a suicide tactic to halt their advance. "Evasive action?" Mira asked. "No," Gene said. He felt the ship's options. Forward shields to maximum. Ramming speed. The Retribution did not deviate. Plowed into the giant harvester. There was a colossal, silent impact felt deep in the bones of the ship. The harvester disintegrated, exploding into a million fragments that scraped and bounced off their shields. The Retribution shuddered but pushed through the expanding fireball, its forward shields flaring bright but holding. They were through the outer layer of the fleet. The world render now filled the viewport, a jagged mountain of black chitinous metal, vast and horrible. The green beam was still connected to the planet, a umbilicus of death. "We're in range of its main defensive weapons," Tay warned. The world render's surface rippled. Hundreds of large, spiked turrets emerged. They glowed with the same green energy, but brighter, more intense. This was the fire that killed planets. "Brace!" Gene shouted. The world render fired. Not a single beam, but a dozen. Thick, searing lances of annihilation shot toward the Retribution. They struck the forward shields all at once. The bridge screamed with incoming energy alerts. The shield integrity bar on Jin's display plummeted. 60%. 40%. The blue-white shield glow turned to stressed, angry red. Shields failing, Mira yelled, her hands flying over her console in the real world as she fought to reroute power. The retribution rocked violently. For the first time, a sound like tearing metal echoed through the hull. They had taken a hit. Minor hull breach on Deck 40, the AI's comm voice reported. Sealed. They were hurt, but they were still flying. And now they were close. Very close. The Atropos Lance requires a 30-second charge sequence and a stable firing solution, Tay said, his mind linked to the weapon's complex machinery. We cannot maneuver while it charges. We will be a sitting target. Jean looked at the screen. The world render was gathering energy for another volley. Their shields would not survive it. They had one chance. Take us closer, Jean ordered. Right down its throat. On my mark, full stop. Mira put every ounce of power into the forward shields for that 30 seconds. Tay, charge the lance. The retribution surged forward, dodging the last of the Harvester fleet, heading straight for the heart of the world render. The planet killer turrets swiveled, trying to track them, but they were too close, too fast. Now, Jean commanded. The giant human warship came to a sudden, complete stop, hanging in space mere kilometers from the scarred surface of the hive ship. It looked like a bird of prey perched before a mountain. Charging sequence initiated, Tay said, his voice a whisper of concentration. On the Retribution's underside, massive panels slid open. A complex array of rings and crystalline focusers extended, glowing with an inner light that was neither blue nor green, but a strange, shifting silver. The world render fired again. A torrent of green energy, enough to crack a continent, slammed into the Retribution's focused forward shields. The shield glowed, red-hot, and began to crackle. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. Shields at 18%. 15. Mira called out, her face strained. 20 seconds.
Tai souted, the shield barrier flickered.
A tendril of green energy broke through. It seared across the Retribution's hull, leaving a deep, smoking trench in the dark metal. 10 seconds. The shields failed. The blue barrier vanished. The full fury of the world render's beam began to impact the naked hull. Armor plates vaporized. The bridge shook so violently Jean thought the ship would come apart. 5 seconds. Fire. Fire now. Jean roared. Firing.
Ta screamed. The Atropos lance activated.
There was no blinding beam, no explosion of force. Instead, a ripple of distorted space, visible as a twisting thread of black and white light, shot silently from the Retribution and passed directly into the heart of the world render. It did not impact the hull. It went through it like a ghost, leaving no mark. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the green beam from the world render to the planet below winked out. All across the hive ship, the glowing green lights of weapons and engines flickered and died. The Retribution, wounded and smoking, hung silently in the sudden, profound darkness. Silence.it was the first thing Jean noticed. The terrible, constant hum of the hive mind through the neural link was gone. It had not faded. It had been cut off completely and suddenly. The pressure in his mind, a pressure he had not even fully registered until it vanished, was absent on the main viewport. The world render was dark. The angry green lights on its spiked surface were all out. It no longer moved. It simply drifted, a dead mountain in the void. The connection to the planet below was severed. The beam of annihilation was gone, leaving only a scar of fire on the world's surface that would now, slowly, begin to cool. Across the battlefield, the change was instant and chaotic. The Harvester ships, which had been moving with perfect, terrifying coordination, suddenly jerked and veered off course. Some spun slowly, engines firing at random. Others drifted, their weapons silent. The swarm of drones became a cloud of confused metal, bumping into each other, floating aimlessly. The single will that had commanded them was no more. On the bridge of the Retribution, the only sounds were the soft crackle of damaged systems and the heavy breathing of its three commanders. Mira was the first to speak. Her voice was hoarse. Sensor scan. The hive mind signal. It's gone. There's no collective consciousness. Just billions of separate, low-level biosigns. Confused. Lost. Gene slowly unlinked from the command chair. The feeling of the immense ship left his mind, leaving him feeling strangely small and alone. He looked at the tactical screen. The red dots representing enemy ships were now flashing yellow, then gray. They were no longer threats. They were just objects. Problems, but not enemies. Tay leaned back in his chair, his face pale with exhaustion. The Atropos lance worked exactly as designed. It severed the quantum entanglement. It didn't kill a single living thing on that ship. It just gave them all their own minds back. A communication alert chimed. It was from the Whisper of Dawn. Captain Alara's face appeared on a side screen. She looked stunned. Gene, what did you do? All the Dominion ships, they just stopped. They're dead in the water. We didn't kill them, Captain, Gene said, his own voice tired. We freed them. The thing that controlled them is gone. They are just individuals now, probably terrified. He looked at the massive, dark world render. It was now the largest prison in history, filled with billions of suddenly conscious creatures who had only ever known the hunger of the hive. What would they do? What could they do? They had no culture, no language of their own, no history except consumption. The work was not over. It had just changed. Captain Alara, Gene said, making a decision. Begin broadcasting a wideband, peaceful signal. Low power. Simple mathematical patterns. Let them know. Let them know the war is over. See if any of the harvesters can even understand. He turned to Mira and Tay. We need to assess our damage, and we need to decide what to do with that. He pointed at the Retribution. The human warship had done its duty. It was wounded. Smoke drifted from a dozen ruptures in its hull. It hung silently, its terrible purpose fulfilled. Over the next few hours, a strange peace settled over the system. The Whisper of Dawn, cautiously, began to move among the drifting harvester ships. There was no aggression. The Gilani creatures inside, separated from the hive, seemed catatonic or simply afraid. Gene, Mira, and Tay walked through the quieter corridors of the Retribution. The AI's voice spoke to them from hidden speakers. Mission parameters achieved. Absolute threat neutralized. Guardian protocol fulfilled. Awaiting new directives. They reached the main bridge. The holographic sphere with its blue light pulsed gently. What happens to you now? Gene asked the AI. This unit can resume dormancy. The vessel will self-repair over time. Can be left to sleep once more in a new lockbox. Or the Council may assume permanent command. The choice is yours. Mira looked around the mighty bridge. We can't just leave it. It's too powerful. What if someone else finds it? What if they misuse it? But we can't be its keepers forever, Tay said. We are not judges. We were just gardeners. We pulled a weed. Gene agreed. The power of the Retribution was too great for anyone to hold. It was a weapon that should never be used lightly. Its existence was a warning. We have a suggestion, Gene said to the AI. Place yourself in a deep sleep. But not here. Take yourself to the very edge of the galaxy, to the empty dark between the stars. Bury yourself in the ice of a rogue planet. Hide so well that only a miracle could find you again. And only wake if the pattern appears again. The blue light pulsed slowly, considering. A logical amendment to the protocol. A deeper lockbox. The Council's logic is sound. Do you confirm this final directive? The three of them looked at each other. They nodded. We confirm, Gene said. Directive accepted. Self-repair sequences will initiate. Long-range navigation engaged. This unit will depart within the hour. The neural links will now disengage. Farewell, Council. The gentle connection in their minds vanished completely. They were just three individuals again in a very quiet, very large room. They took a last shuttle back to the Whisper of Dawn. From its observation deck, they watched as the Retribution's engines glowed once more. It turned slowly, a giant wounded king, and began to move away. It did not jump to faster-than-light travel. It simply accelerated into the deep black, heading for the unimaginable cold and distance at the galaxy's rim, to sleep and forget. The devastation was over. It had ended not with the bang of a billion deaths, but with the bewildered silence of a billion awakenings. The galaxy was scarred, but it was alive. The long, slow work of healing would take centuries. The Gilani would need to be helped or contained as a new species of billions of lonely minds. The Concord would need to be rebuilt. Jean put a hand on Myra's shoulder. He gave a nod to Tay. They were not heroes of a great war. They were caretakers who had found a forgotten tool and put it back in its shed. They had a lot of work to do,